Now we're actually going to calculate the circumference. So we're actually going to work this out, and it's no harder than estimating, except we actually got to put in the real number for pi. So remember our formulas that we had here, formulae that we had here, and we're going to take the diameter this time, and we're going to go, the circumference is 2, oh, not for diameter, it's pi times the diameter, which is 2. So 2 times, so let's put in pi. Let's put in our diameter, which is 2. And 2 times this will be 6.28 centimeters. And there's our answer. Now let's take this one. Remember our formula is going to be pi times 2. So we know what pi is. Oh, not times 2, times 24 in this case. So if pi is 3.14 times 24. And when you calculate that, and I think I will bring another calculator out here to make it a little bit easier right now. So let's take 3.14, multiply that by 24, and the answer is 75.36. So remember, all we're really doing is punching in numbers to the formula of the circumference, which is pi times the diameter. So pi is always the same. You'll never forget this one. And the diameter is 4.2. Multiply it together, and we get 4.2 times 3.14, and the answer is 13.188. Now, quite often you'll be told to round it off to the nearest, maybe the nearest tenth, maybe the nearest hundredth, but make sure you put in your centimeters afterwards. The only difference when you're calculating the circumference with radius is basically you've got to take 2 times pi times r. Okay? Now, if you know the radius, you can just double the radius and then times it by pi. That's the easiest way to do it. Okay? Now, watch what happens when I put this in. I'll put 2 times 3.14 times the radius, which is 2. Okay? Now, I'll put the answer up here using a calculator, of course. So 2 times 3.14, and then I got to times it by 2 because that was the radius, and the answer is 12.56. And I'll put that down here. 12.56 centimeters. Funny, because when we had a radius of 2 here, and we're going to double it, it ended up basically being double what we had here. For this one again, we're going to go 2 times pi times the radius, which is 24. And you multiply all that out, and you'll get the answer for that one. Same with this one. Remember, it's going to be 2 times pi times r. So it's going to be 2 times 3.14 times the radius, which is 4.2. When you look at it, it makes sense because double the radius, which is what this really is the diameter, isn't it? So if you don't know the diameter, you just double the radius. That's why that formula works. Now here's another one where the circumference is given. Sometimes you might not be given the radius. You might be given the circumference and you're told to find the radius. It's kind of like when you were doing this before. Let's say when you had 4x equals 8. you remember how to get x all by itself? Well, simply you'd have to divide by what's in front of the x. So if this is 4 times x, you divide that by 4 and it cancels out. You divide this by 4 and now x is all by himself like that. And 8 divided by 4 is 2. Now you've just solved for x. Well, it's going to be very similar when you work on this one, when you want to get r all by itself. So here you're given the circumference. So let's take our circumference, which is 10, okay, and let's put him in right there for C. So 10 is the circumference. And we've got 2, and we know what pi is, times 3.14 times r. Now if you work that out, 2 times 3.14 is going to be 6.28. And then we've still got r. And how do we get r all by himself? All we simply have to do is divide it by what's in front of it. So divide it by 6.28, and you better do the same thing to the other side to make sure it stays the same. This will cancel out that, and now you'll be left with r equals whatever 10 divided by 6.28 equals. So I'm going to do that. So we've got 10 divided by 6.28 equals. And the answer, I'm going to round it off to 2 decimal places, so 1.59. 59 centimeters. So now I've just found my radius. If I wanted to find the diameter, I could just times it by 2, or double the radius. Or if I really wanted to use the formula, I could just simply go pi times d. I could fill in 10 for c. I can fill in 3.144 pi, and then divide it like this, and you will end up with basically the same answer for your diameter, which is going to be twice that amount. Okay, so it will work either way. Sometimes you'll see the formula written a little bit differently. You might see this c equals 2 pi r. You might see sometimes the 2 put down, 2 pi put over here, and you might see it looking like this. So if I divide this by 2 pi and divide this by 2 pi, your formula will look like the radius equals circumference over 2 pi, like that. So you can really change the formula around yourself, or you can work it out the same way. Okay, section 3, area of a parallelogram. If you look at any kind of a parallelogram, you will see that a parallelogram is just a slanted rectangle. So you take this rectangle and squish it, and it'll kind of look like that. And you remember with a rectangle, all you got to do is multiply one side times the other side, which is really the height, because this is the height of the rectangle, and this is also the height of the rectangle, because they're the same, right? A rectangle's not slanted. So the area is really the bottom, the base, times the height of a rectangle. Well, it's the exact same thing with a parallelogram or a slanted rectangle, or it could be square-like. The only difference is you can't take this for the height, because that's not really how tall it is. That's going to be a little bit longer. This is the height from here to here, and you'll work out the height that way. So you'll have the area will be the base times the height for a parallelogram. So let's take this one here. We've got the base is right here, 6. We've got the height right here, which is 4. So the area is going to be 6 times 4, which equals 24. And don't forget to put your centimeters there. And because we're talking about area, or the inside part, it's going to be centimeters squared. In this case, it kind of looks like it's been tilted on its side. It doesn't matter. You could still either rotate it yourself to make it look normal to you, or just, if you want to look at it, we'll call this the base, and this is the height. So we can work out our formula. The base is 3.6. The height is 2. So we're going to double 3.6. And the answer will be 7.2 centimeters squared. That will be the area. Now sometimes you'll be given the area. Remember you were given the circumference of a circle? Well, sometimes you're going to be given the area in the formula, and you won't be given something else. Like in this case, you don't know what the base is, but you do know the height. So let's fill in what we do know. Here's the height, right here. We've got a times here in between it. We don't know the base, so I'm going to put B for base, and we know the area is 24. Now, what do we want all by itself? Well, we want the base. So all I'm going to do is divide this whole thing by 6, and that will cancel out that. And I'm going to divide this by 6. So I'll be left with base on this side. 24 divided by 6 is 4. So the answer is 4 centimeters. And it's not squared because we're only talking about the length. We're not talking about all this area inside, which is 2 dimensions.